welcome to this year's Blue-Green Panel Series, hosted by Alta Sea at the Port of LA, the LA Coalition, Santa Monica College, and California State Northridge with the Sustainability Department. This is, as probably some of you already know, a four-part series of panels and discussions that we've had now. This is our third year. We're trying to convene some of the top minds from aquaculture and sustainability fields, including a lot of the experts from the local colleges and research institutions, and some of the founders of some very innovative companies around this subject matter. Now, the goal of the series has been to shine a spotlight on the emerging aquaculture sector and the blue economy. You know, the series reimagines the partnership between business, universities, government, and communities through regenerative ocean research, exploration, and equity-based economic development. You have to bear with me, a little windy out here with my comments. You know, this is, they had one of the panel series already happened this week. This is the second one, and I think there's another one this week, and then a fourth. So I encourage you, if you're interested in seeing them as they're already taped and filmed, or the ones that are coming up, I encourage you to go to the Alta Sea under the Project Blue webpage. You can learn a lot about these different panels. Today's panel, though, the topic is building a sustainable workforce in an emerging blue economy. I first want to thank our host, Octavio Ramirez, who I had met earlier, who is the master gardener here at this amazing center that's hosting us, the South Bay Center for Counseling at the heart of the Harbor Community Farm. And I really recommend that anybody that's not familiar with this public-private partnership in this community-based organization to step down here. It is amazing and the work they're doing, and you can see it in the passion of the people that I've met so far. So for myself, as someone who, with the LA Coalition, I focus all my time really on trying to build a more equitable economy here in Los Angeles and produce better paying jobs and help people get the skills. Can you still hear me? Help people get the skills to get those jobs. You know, I've had the good fortune of living a majority of my life living by the ocean. And I still have a lot of family members back in Massachusetts who still make a living, and part of their diet is still off the ocean. So I've got a great respect for it, and definitely knows that our oceans, which a lot of people aren't familiar with, that's how we sustain life here on planet Earth. So if we don't take care of the ocean, definitely we're not going to be around that much longer. So on the workforce part, here in the blue economy, what I like about it, and I say to a lot of people, is the more people, if you can't beat it, you can't see it. These type of panels and everything else, and getting it out there and pushing on social media or Facebook and other things, or people in the community coming out, is if you can get people to see this emerging blue economy, what it is, where the opportunities are. I think the best part about it is not just gaining a skill set, but it's gaining a skill set in jobs that are actually going to help sustain and save the planet. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? I think it's just an amazing opportunity. So with that, I always like to, as the moderator, I get the fun part. I get to hang out with really smart people who I like to think that they figured out what they're good at. People have helped them along the way. They figured that their own skill sets have been built over time. And then they show the passion for what they do once they learn what they're good at. So today, our panel consists of, we have 4 folks here, starting with Samantha Leigh, who's an assistant professor, Department of Biological Science at Cal State Dominguez Hills. We'll learn a little more about her. And we have Leigh Fournier, Director of Economic Vitality at Strength-Based Community Change, located here right in Wilmington. Rick Aguayo, Program Manager for Career Pathways, program at Strength-Based Community Change. And then we had Eros Cortez, who was added in here as a Program Manager for Thriving Together. And now this is the fun part of getting through the introductory, is having the conversation. I like to keep it informal but really personal, because I know the sincerity and authenticity of these people come out. And so with that, I wanted to start all the way at the end, where Dr. Samantha Leigh, fascinating story, if you could look online at her bio and all that stuff. But I do favors, like, what are you doing here? How'd you get here? Who are you?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here today. Thank you so much for hosting and everyone for being here. So I'm Dr. Samantha Leigh. I'm an assistant professor at Cal State Dominguez Hills in the biology department. And my scientific background is in nutritional physiology of marine organisms. So I'm really interested in what marine animals all across the oceanic food web are eating, how they're processing that food, how they're getting energy from that food, and then what they do with it. But going way back before that, just thinking about how I kind of got into this field and got into science in general, I can think back to as far as the third grade. I still remember my third grade teacher, Miss Zwick, if you're watching, hi Miss Zwick. And she gave me a project on the ocean, and I had to interview a marine scientist, and I had never even heard that term before. I didn't know that that was a career option that someone could have, was to study the ocean. That sounded like a dream come true to me. So I got to interview I was living in Maine at the time actually, so I interviewed a marine scientist, a woman who was studying the lobster fishery up there. And I got to ask her what she did for a living and what she liked about her job and how she got to be where she is today. And that kind of made me realize that, I could do something like that when, I get older. So I went on to get my bachelor's degree in marine science from Coastal Carolina University. And then ultimately what brought me out here to California was an internship at the Wrigley Institute on Catalina Island. And that was my first experience as an undergraduate student doing a research project from start to finish, coming up with the project, getting to live on the island and really be immersed in the research process. And I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity. From there, I went on to be a research technician after I got my degree at a couple of different labs. So I worked at a water quality research lab in Costa Mesa here, the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project, or SQUIRP. And then I also worked as a research tech for a year at the University of Georgia, and a lab that studied fish as a model for immune diseases. So something very, very different. So there's definitely no one path to get to where I am today and to do something similar to what I do. But yeah, then I went on to get my graduate degree from UC Irvine and really started learning a lot about nutritional physiology and how important it is for all the other body systems of the organisms that I study to work. And I found my love of teaching there as well. So I do a lot of teaching at Cal State Dominguez Hills now, teaching the next generation about opportunities that they could have. So that's kind of the long-winded answer to your question, but yeah, it's a little bit about me.
I love it. Thank you very much. And it shows, that's a journey. Right? You're studying the ocean, but you're in Georgia, you're in Maine, you've kind of been everywhere, and that's part of kind of finding and figuring yourself out. And so, Eli, what's your story?
Yeah, pleasure meeting you. Test 1, 2. It's windy and it's cold, but it's good to be outdoors. It's good to be in this beautiful place. My name's Leigh Fournier, really long-time Wilmington resident, and I've been part of SBCC, Strength-Based Community Change, for most of my adult life. And I'm passionate about building career pathways that lead to long-term jobs, high-paying jobs in relation to industries and local industries that are in our communities that many of our residents can have access to. And that's part of my story. I grew up in Wilmington. Parents were pastors. They planted a church, Spanish church here in Wilmington. And growing up in Wilmington, you always try to look at, okay, what are the possibilities? What's next? And in Wilmington, we have a lot of refineries, but I didn't know anything about the refineries. No one had shared. There was no classroom. There was no lessons about how the refineries work. I just had heard they pay well. But it just seemed that for a Wilmington kid, a job like that, a career like that, you would either need to know someone that worked there, you would have to be someone's kid. And so there was just all these stigmas or ideas that you thought, there's no way I can get into a job like that. And so I was going to community college. I was working at an after-school program, 19 years old, still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I got an invitation by one of our volunteers at this after-school program, Coach Guerra. And he let me know that there was this pilot program that they were trying and testing out for local kids in Wilmington to go and interview and potentially get to have the opportunity to intern and have a job at one of these refineries. And so I said, you know what, it sounds crazy, but I'll try it. And I remember signing up and getting the invitation and going to one of the local refineries. I was interviewed, and in that process I was accepted to be part of this pilot program that they were launching. And so in about 3 months, I was hired in, and I started working for the refinery. And you know, it's great money. First year, over 80 grand. My second year, I made 6 figures for a 20-year-old kid in Wilmington. That's really great. And I was able to do a lot with that and support my mom, a single mother at that time, and my younger brother. And I felt that this is my life. This is my purpose. And so going into that 3rd year, as much as I enjoyed the work, as much as I enjoyed being able to support my family the way I was doing at that age, I felt my calling was elsewhere. And I felt like I wanted to give back to my community. I felt like I wanted to help create other opportunities for other young people in my community. And so I took a leap of faith, and I remember talking to my supervisors at the refinery and saying, hey, I know this is crazy, but I think I'm gonna go back to school, and then I'm gonna come back and somehow do something where I can help my community in Wilmington and in the South Bay. And I appreciate that through all of that, I got nothing but good support. And so when I came back from school, I came back to Wilmington, and I was able to learn and hear about SBCC, Strength-Based Community Change. And I was hired as a community organizer, youth organizer here in Wilmington. And in the last years, I mean, I would say the past years, not only have I grown, but I've seen just the impact of this organization and the impact of connecting everyday residents to opportunities, if it's careers, if it's jobs, if it's resources. And I knew I wanted to be a part of that. And so I'm thankful that now, full circle, I get to help support and innovate and lead in the area of workforce development. And that's something that we continue to want to pursue and something we need in our communities. How do we connect people to career pathways that lead to real jobs? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, it's kind of the question I'm going to have for you guys here, because I got to figure out part of Samantha's path is the idea of, you know, with Rick, program management, career pathways, and everything else. It's like, when's the first time you actually heard somebody define the blue economy? 1, 2, that there's amazing incubator space right down here at the port that people are innovating and they're thinking, you know, thinking of things, and there's agricultural farms and other type of stuff. So kind of tell me a little your background, and maybe kind of weave for both of them ultimately something to think about Eros too, of that part of understanding. A lot of people understand farming the ground, but never pictured, you know, farming the ocean.
Yeah, definitely. I apologize. My history and my background is not as elaborate and in depth as
You're still young, so
Samantha. So really quick, born and raised in Long Beach. Got my undergrad in biology at Long Beach State. I'm currently doing my master's at Dominguez. So I'm excited that it's definitely something new. I took a break, 10 years to be exact. I have 2 little beautiful girls and a loving wife at home. So it's definitely not something easy. And then I was lucky enough to come across SBCC and Eli, and working together to develop this program. Like Eli said, the career pathways, specifically energy pathway program, the one that we have now, is focused on getting individuals in the low-income communities here in Wilmington and the South Bay to these 6-figure jobs, and that's my goal. And the goal is to see them succeed, and me seeing them fulfill their dreams is enough for me. And developing new paths to where we can outreach to more individuals in our community and get them into new economies and changing, adapting environments is my goal. To develop a new thing and to be able to bring in new ventures for them, not to just to be that path that everybody has, is you're gonna do this, this, and this, and that's it. That's the end of it. No, there's definitely options you can go through. You're not stuck with one. Like you define your path, and that's what I strongly believe.
What are some of the kids telling you nowadays?
The student, it's kind of what Eli mentioned. It's one of those things where they didn't see themselves being able to make six figures in a refinery, even though it's right behind their backyard. They just didn't see it. It wasn't achievable. And times are changing, and there's ways to go about it. And our students and our residents are just as bright as anybody that has a degree or has had 20 years of experience. It's just that opportunity that they were lacking, and that's where we come in. We say, you give it your best, give it 110%. My job is to get you that path. Give it 110% as well, and I'll get you there. I just need your commitment, a little bit of sacrifice, but I just need your commitment to be able to get there. And then I tell them, if you don't see that I'm doing my job, then call me out on it. Not just as equal as you. So that's a little bit of my story.
I love it. That's gonna applause. I mean, that's what I love. I've lived in Los Angeles now for 25 years, raising a family here. Is like, you just don't have a lack of people who who care. I mean, there's just so many people that care, and there's so many organizations and so many people who are running those organizations who are at the heart of it are doing everything to prove out that, yeah, it doesn't matter where you're from, what you look like, anything, is we're going to do everything we can to provide an opportunity. You change one life, you could change generations of lives. So, before we go to Eros, yeah.
Sorry. I just want to add something, because I appreciate that question. The second question you asked about, so what are the young people saying? And one thing I would add is, and we're seeing this, I mean, nationally, statistically, more young people are looking to non-traditional ways to reach the area that they're interested in. And I know, no disrespect to all the scholars, and I know the representation of schools here, but there's an opportunity to, and even in these conversations, to work together and partner and look at, okay, what does that look like for low-income communities? What does that look like to providing more accessibility and more exposure to opportunities that can lead to long-lasting careers that may not look like the traditional way that things have done, that the way things have been. And so I think I'm excited about the possibilities of these types of conversations and opportunities when even we look at an economy like the blue economy, that for many people it's something that's still new. It's something that to them doesn't seem tangible, and yet there's so many opportunities. And so how do we begin to connect those dots of exposure and then resources that can become potential careers? I mean, that to me is exciting.
All right. Eros, Cortez, I love the title. You've got Thriving.
Thriving Together, yes sir.
Thriving Together. So tell us a little about yourself and what you're working on.
Good afternoon everybody, thank you for having me here. My name is Eros Cortez. A little bit about myself, just taking notes from what everybody's been saying. I was born and raised in the country of Mexico, beautiful state of Zacatecas. I was a pretty scared child growing up. I was exposed to nature and didn't quite understand it very well. Growing up, I loved and I learned to love nature, and now being program manager for an after-school program, I have the opportunity to share not only what I learned in school, not only what was taught to me by my grandparents, but also how to love learning as well. And so what I can provide today to our students is an opportunity and experiences that are not regularly offered in our communities. I am here today mainly because I understand some of the basic structures of a hobby. To myself it's a hobby, but it's keeping plants, keeping animals, sustaining life in a easy way where things are self-sustaining, recirculating systems. Mainly what I do is keeping terrariums, aquariums, and I have the opportunity and the privilege of sharing that with our students, which is exposing them to engineering, exposing them to the hobby of keeping pets, learning to understand nature, learning to keep enclosed systems and tending to life in a way that is non-intrusive, but more than anything, having our students be exposed to opportunities that they don't regularly have. And so that is my standing here today. Thank you.
So what level of kids are you working with?
I have the privilege of working with K through 12 in the community of Wilmington here. We meet 4 days out of the week. So for me, it's working with as young as a kindergartner, as old as a high schooler, and seeing the level of engagement that they all have. It's very rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, because, right? I mean, kids they just see the world differently. When I was a trustee at Alta C, and working with some of the staff that I see here today, that's what we came up with, this Project Blue, right? We just started with simplicity of essays and contests to draw artwork and everything else, and how people and kids see the ocean. And I bet you some of the kids probably didn't even see the ocean. The artwork they did was phenomenal, and they did some videos and other things. So that I thank you for doing what you do. So now, kind of jumping now into the significance of this work. You know, we're talking about the workforce development stuff, and kind of now putting our finger on some of the things that are, you know, in the aquaculture, the field of sustainability, and you know, fish industry and all that other stuff, and kind of seeing, like, you know, where's the research going? What are we seeing? What are things that we have to intervene on, and potentially jobs that might align with that? So, you know, one of the things, Samantha, this big issue that probably here is, I think it was in the news today, this big gigantic garbage patch that's sitting out in the Pacific Ocean that just seems to get bigger and bigger. And you think about a lot of, you know, terminology that is the microplastics. And if you think about it, like, the world's population, majority of it still gets their protein from fish in the world's oceans. And because of human intervention and some ways that aren't great, we have some of these microplastics getting into our food sources. And that's a significant thing. So can you tell us a little about that, and potentially what we can do, or, you know, potentially innovative minds can think about to try to change that?
Sure. So definitely, I think it's very easy for us to see, and it's very tangible, the macro plastics, like the large garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean. You can see it, you understand that it's a problem, but that plastic never really goes away entirely. It just degrades and degrades into tinier and tinier and tinier pieces, and then it's more able to flow into other areas and throughout the oceans. So it becomes almost more of a problem in some ways the smaller and smaller those plastic particles get. Also because then they become ingested by pretty much every organism in the ocean that you can think of. So one of the things that we're studying in my lab is how microplastics are entering oceanic food webs. And we are, you know, seeing under not super powerful microscopes, regular dissecting scopes, looking at plankton, the, you know, smallest organisms in the ocean, and they are ingesting plastic. We can see it in their gut tissue. The plastic is entangling their mobility in, you know, organisms that are essentially the base of the oceanic food web. So you know that if they're eating it and they're getting entangled in it, that pretty much everything else that is above them in the food web is also going to be exposed to those plastics. So of course, that is going to impact the seafood that you and I eat. And we are finding microplastics in all different tissue types of the organism. So not just the gut tissue, but also in the muscle tissue, which is the main part of the fish that we eat, right? So there's lots of potential adverse health effects that could come along with that. So one of the biggest ones would be toxicants leaching off of those plastics into the muscle of the fish, into the bloodstream of the fish, and getting into other tissues. And then, of course, in consuming those, we get exposure to those toxicants as well. But there's not a lot of information known yet about all the potential effects that it could have. So we know that it likely affects like our endocrine system, so that affects growth and reproduction, for example. We know that it's getting into our blood vessels, which are going to every single cell of your body, right? So this could be a potentially really big problem, and we don't know yet the extent of this problem. But similarly to how we have, acceptable levels of mercury in fish that you can consume, we need to start thinking about this in terms of acceptable levels of toxicants coming from microplastics that you might be able to consume. And we just don't have the data to know exactly what that is yet. But that's definitely something that a lot of people are working towards. Another thing that I'll mention is, because that was kind of very doom and gloom, so I'm sorry about that, but we want to find a way to prevent it, right? We need that information so that we know then what needs to be addressed. So there are plastics in the ocean. There's some things we can do to try to clean it up and get it out, but I think our main course of action has to be preventing further contamination. And right now, there really is not a unified way to try to prevent microplastics from getting into the ocean. So there's no specific filtration in stormwater runoff, for example, or in wastewater treatment that is targeting specific types of microplastics. So research going into those mechanisms of trying to prevent those microplastics from making it to the ocean in the first place, I think is where a lot of our research should be directed at this point.
Kind of get you thinking about what we're doing, the impact we have, and once again use the word intervene again, is the field of aquaculture, right? There's something unique and different, not that we haven't, it's been going on for decades, but the extent of what we've learned that we could do with it, right? And how we can learn how to grow more of it for our needs. How much of that field have you kind of looked at, and what do you think the potential is there for growth and jobs around some of that stuff? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is definitely a growing field. There's lots of research going into what fish and, not just fish, but what types of seafood are best able to be farmed. So I think it's a very new, very growing field. Kind of tying it back to the microplastics as well, we would be able to control, presumably, a lot better the types of contamination that are getting into those farmed species of fishes. We can, put filtration in much easier in a, closed system than we would be able to, preventing stormwater from getting into the ocean. So there is also that kind of positive aspect of it, that we're able to control it a lot more. We can control what pollutants those fish could be exposed to throughout their growth. Microplastics are unfortunately everywhere, so there would, I don't think, be any way to completely prevent it, but there is a way for sure to kind of minimize their exposure to some of those contaminants.
And what about your students? What are your students? What's on their mind?
With respect to aquaculture, or
just in respect to marine sciences and everything that they're learning in your classroom and everything else?
Yeah, so I think a lot of students often don't really realize that research in general about the ocean is a viable career path, and that there's multiple different ways that you can be involved in that. So one of the classes that I love to teach is our seminar class, and we have a new guest speaker every week that we invite that does a different aspect of some career related to biology. And we have people from the National Park Service and OC Sanitation or LA Sanitation District come. We have people from forensics office come, and just try to expose them to as many different careers in biology as possible. And not just biology, but also to show that there are lots of different fields that are needing to work together on these types of problems. So, for example, with trying to create a filter to prevent microplastics, I'm trying to partner with some engineers to do that, because that's not my area of expertise. So there's lots of ways to get involved in this topic career-wise that I think a lot of students are just starting to realize are options, which is really exciting.
So yeah, one of the proud thing for myself that I worked on was the creation of a new philanthropic board for Cal State Dominguez Hills. And with the development of that board, what I noticed is a lot of times we had these board meetings. They always had a student come in and talk about their story, and either how they got into the university, how they matriculated, they graduated from the university, how they went on to get a job, and raise a family and everything else, and some kids from some of the worst circumstances. And it's the one thing that was always the same. There was always somebody that pulled them up, not all the way, but just enough to get to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So my expectation is, looking at these gentlemen, Eli, Rick, and Eros, is like to think with the work that you guys do, a year from now, if we came back, you say what? What did we learn? What do you think we've learned today? We know about the blue economy, aquaculture, everything else, and the work that you do in these communities that don't have all the resources that some other communities do. What are some of the messages you think that you're working on, that you're gonna align more to the opportunities at the port, above and beyond? And they don't have to go into the field of aquaculture or robotics or other kind of raising mussels or anything else, but they could still, someone used the term hobby, still do stuff around these issues. So what are some of the things that you guys are working on here? Because I can see tangibly, it's right in front of me, the garden and the animals and all that other stuff, and the ocean's just right off in the distance. So talk a little about what you're working on, and other things.
Definitely, and thank you for the question. I think for us, what we understand is that there's a lot of flexibility for this field. Aquaculture, and regularly when you would speak of water itself, you tend to think of fresh water, right? Something that you'd be able to drink. And there is something for everybody in this field. Aquaculture, sure, it can be mainly for the ocean, but we can also work with freshwater systems. We're looking at different methods of farming where we are able to utilize space more effectively, resources, water, and like you mentioned, Doctor, an enclosed system would be able to tamper with specific variables, fertilizers, medication for fish, light spectrum, and intensity. And with that being said, I think that there is something for everybody to contribute. You don't necessarily need to be in the ocean. You don't necessarily need to know a lot about vegetation, but you can contribute with, say you're an engineer, you can develop a better system for electricity to be used in the field, for plants to be grown in a vertical space, for harvesting methods, for so many other different aspects of aquaculture. One of the great things about aquaculture is that you don't necessarily need to tamper with the whole ecosystem to produce results, but you can grow it at a smaller scale, and really be able to consider every single variable. If one thing is affecting the system, vegetation or the fish, or even the waste that is being produced or the water that is being consumed, you can do it at a smaller scale and then being able to replicate that with larger systems. And I think that for our youth, for our students nowadays, they'll be able to select or focus on something specifically where they feel they'd be able to contribute. So at SBCC, what we do is we offer opportunities for students to be able to interact with something that they're interested in, not something that they should be forced to do or that they feel that they need to compel to or meet certain requirements, but rather something that they want to contribute, something that they feel passionate about. And luckily for us, we're able to share that passion with them. I'm able to share my love for nature, my appreciation for life itself, and pass it on to them and have them understand that although I may not be able to contribute at a larger scale like some other organizations or other works that are being done in the world, I may be able to contribute something through the work that I am doing, through the studies, through the interaction with nature, maybe in the classroom, maybe at home, maybe in your laboratory. But it doesn't necessarily need to be that they are working in the ocean or for those things that we've mentioned, right?
I think as Edo said it, I think it's a matter of putting in your expertise and kind of giving them a guide. And like you said, it's just that little push that somebody provides them. I think as far as career pathways goes, we're collaborating and we're trying to figure out how we can partner with a college. For example, Santa Monica Colleges, I know, is working on an aquaculture certificate. We're working with our local community colleges, Harbor, and some colleges that we're actually worked with in the past. And the idea is to bring that cohort model that works for us, where we have these 30 students essentially go through the same process, and they have each other's backs. They are able to rely on each other to kind of get through the hard times, because they do work 9 to 5s. They do have families. They are, the majority are low income, and we provide that support to be able to make it easier on them and give them that extra push. But the idea is develop this new program, a new path that kind of exposes them to the ocean, aquaculture, new career possibilities. Maybe we can use what we have now and tie that into the ocean. It doesn't necessarily mean develop something new. It's just take what you have, pieces of it, and guide them that way. And that's where they can get exposure into new careers and new interests. Maybe even hobbies that they can then take and turn into careers, like Eros says. So that's what Career Pathways is doing, and I think it's moving along smoothly, and I'm excited. I think a year from now we can probably.
And I guess
say,
you have an energy program here?
Yeah.
Someone mentioned something about in the development potentially of a marine energy certificate.
Yeah, so what the Energy Pathway program is a certification in process technology. So that is what it is now. It gives the student a certification to be able to go on to our local refineries. Like Eli said, Eli was part of the beginning stages of that program, where we partnered with the refineries, a community college, and the Steelworkers Union. So they are able to get certified in process tech, and they become operators in some of these refineries. The beauty of that is we can see that we can take some of that curriculum and possibly either add on to it or take pieces of it to develop a new one, to then develop a new program where we can gear it towards ocean, we can gear it towards hydrogen, we can gear it towards other sustainable renewable energy. And that's amazing. It's something that's in our grasp and is not just all talk. And I think that's coming along pretty nicely.
Yeah, because I think part of it, I mean, I want to jump to Eli, but learning is, the institutions of higher education, they exist for a phenomenal reason. It's the passing on of knowledge over time in cultural, learnings and everything else. So, yeah, you've got the microphone now. One of the, just before you jump into, is one of the things I hear a lot is, like, you're saying there's a lot of great programs out there, but the challenge we face is a lot of things aren't going to scale. So some of the numbers, it's about 450,000 jobs open today in the LA region that aren't being filled. And we have a labor force participation rate that's pretty low. We have to figure out how to get people, into these positions with the understanding of higher institutions are there, but the more and more we're hearing is it's that lifelong learning of having on-ramps and off-ramps for learning over time. So,
Yeah,
turn
no.
over to you.
I agree with that, and you gotta understand, I'm coming from community-based nonprofit approach, and we've been saying, I think in multiple opportunities here today, we've been talking about the need for exposure. But it's not just the exposure, right? It's the approach. And to your question and to your point, the approach is critical in understanding, first of all, making an investment in the local communities, knowing that there is a workforce, and there's interest. There's desire. I mean, we're seeing these younger generations, the kids that Eros works with on a daily basis that come after school and spend hours wanting to learn more, is because they're interested. And they're interested not just in learning something, they're interested in wanting to make a difference for their community, for their world, and for their future. And so there has to be more of an investment, but the investment has to have an approach to understand our communities. We have to understand and know that there needs to be trust, and there needs to be a partnership with residents. What I love about the Energy Pathway program is that this formula requires local employers. So the industry has to buy in, right? And so for our Energy Pathway program, local employers had to buy in, but also make an investment so that they could see the development of this workforce and trust the process. It also required to have institutional educational partners to provide the certification, but be able to be flexible enough to also understand the populations and the areas of need. And then the third piece to that formula is the nonprofit local organizations that are grassroots organizations that are connected with residents, that are working with residents every single day and see the different areas and needs that exist. And so even in that simple formula or model, you're now seeing really a backing from 3 strongholds that can really support an individual to succeed and go from the first step all the way to where they need to go, right? These are the types of opportunities I think that we can see in different industries and possibilities of creating pathways and opportunities for folks to get their degree, to get their certification, to find their way into these jobs. And some of these jobs that we're really hearing that are being formed. I mean, they're blossoming as we speak, and new jobs that are being created because this is an entire whole new world that we are discovering. And so it's exciting because at least here, and I'll speak for this community here in Wilmington, I mean, the ocean is a few minutes away. That breeze that we're feeling right now, that's part of that, right? And so although there is a port that's in the way and we can't get in the sand and swim a bit, but still the ocean is accessible. It's close by. And so there are opportunities. One of the things I love about what Eros is doing with his young people is that in his approach, he is providing a space for young people to dream a bit more and be intrigued by experiential learning. And so I would challenge, our educational system. I would challenge LAUSD to really look in the mirror and see how can we better apply some of these opportunities and lessons around experiential learning for young people to get that spark that I'm sure you mentioned you're that teacher, and you talked about sparks earlier, those sparks that could really create something in them that they want to pursue.
It makes me think about the challenges, because I know like LA Unify has a program with Fender, people get a guitar, and there's other kind of tutoring type programs out there. But when it comes to the ocean, right, the experience of most people, no matter what community they're from, is dipping their toe in the water or wading in or jumping in and jumping out, not knowing really what's under the surface. Like until you have scuba dived or snorkeled with fish and marine life and all that, then you kind of just realize just how insignificant you are in a sense in the bigger planet of, 78% of our planet is covered by oceans and water. And so I've never really heard of any kind of programs that get kids underneath the surface to actually see the living environment. So kind of leading into that question, starting with Samantha, and I'd like to kind of go down the line of, is not the magic wand question, but like what's there that you think about? Because when you do this work, you see the opportunities. And sometimes you're still kind of putting a hypothesis or something in your head to prove it out before you make an ask or do anything else. Because I just know it's like Los Angeles, there's so many people with a lot of money that like to grant those dollars, and they're trying to figure out where to put them. So kind of starting down the row of like, what are you seeing? Where do you see the opportunity that might be that you see?
Yeah, so speaking from my experience at the university level, a lot of our students have gotten to this point, and they're in a biology degree, they're learning about the ocean, they're learning about these environments in the classroom, but they still have not made it out to the ocean or on a boat or anything like that. One of my research students that started working with me in 2021 had never been to the ocean before and grew up in Carson, very close to the ocean. So we had to change that. So we found the funds. We got on a research vessel, we went out on a boat, we collected fish, we talked about the diversity of the fish that we were finding, and you could just tell, it all clicked. So the work that we were doing in class all of a sudden made so much more sense when we were out there on the boat. So if I could take all of my students on, at least one field trip to a natural environment, during every semester, I think it would make a world of difference for them to be able to experience it firsthand and really see what they're learning in class in person. I think that would make a huge difference. And one of the kind of issues with making that happen is, of course, transportation. So a lot of our field trips that we do now, we don't have the ability to bring, a class of 24 students out with our own vehicles. So having that access, just, a simple van, it doesn't take much really to be able to get students to the ocean is honestly one of our biggest barriers at this point. But that experience for them is in a lot of ways life-changing. This student that I had mentioned is now, pursuing graduate degrees in environmental research. And if we have, multiply that by 24 students in a lab class, that is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things out there. I mean, this whole blue-green series had come about from conversations of our partners at Cal State Northridge. Dr. Janet Kubler she was working with, they had a seaweed festival up near Santa Barbara for a number of years, and so we kind of sparked the idea of why not do something around, the blue-green for ourselves with Altasea and all that stuff. But who would have thought, a seaweed festival, seeing where there's things that people can go out and interact with. So
I just love that I'm the only one shaking up here. And I'm embarrassed that I'm cold. I'm gonna piggyback with the doctor and really just double down on there needs to be investments. And I'm gonna say there needs to be a financial investment. I mean, Eros, jump in here, but we could use a van too, and I imagine the impact that would make. But I say that not jokingly, but seriously. We're talking about resources that, if they were available for many of our communities, and they were available in a way that young people, students, high school students, elementary school students would have these opportunities, that they really are more than just a field trip, that they could be a spark that begins to mold and establish a seed or something in them that can really lead them that way. So and I think that investment, there's opportunities not only to look at local government, but to really look at potential employers, to really look at folks that have money that want to put it in something good, that these are opportunities for some of these young kids in support of what they're already doing, to be able to inspire them and move them forward.
I think I'm going to piggyback on Dr. Leigh and Eli. I think accessibility has been the biggest issue. It's been the biggest obstacle. Like everybody's mentioned, the ocean is so close yet so far away, because we do have the port, and we do have individuals that just can't make it. The transportation to go to a local beach is difficult, and when they are able to, unfortunately they can't go to our water. They have to venture out to Redondo or Long Beach or nearby. I think accessibility is the biggest thing, and I think the investment portion from those individuals that are able to provide that access and facilitate that that gap is for them to bring in those resources into the communities if they can't venture out to them. Why not have some of these investors or potential employers bring what they have into our communities and make it easier for them to be exposed and to plant that seed, because that's all it takes. It just takes a little bit of exposure and engagement for them to be able to be like, that's what I want to do. And that's the beauty of these developments and partnerships between, for example, all to see or other potential employers and campuses, where we can have the education either be online to fit our demographics and our communities, but have an in-person lab where they can have tenants like RCAM and USC at one location so they can see. And that'll potentially open up a whole new mindset for our community and our residents and students and kids and adults, whoever it be, to be able to find something that they want to do.
Eros, maybe talk about how like the farm is an example of that.
Definitely. Something just kept on floating through my mind. You know, as an adult, I would always think, oh man, if I'd only known about this when I was younger, right? And maybe some of you shared the same thought. Luckily for us, and again, it's a privilege at Thriving Together. Every single year, we have the opportunity to offer over 40 students. We've done, God, almost up to 60 students in 1 year. Don't ask me how that went. But we are able to offer them a series of over 7 weeks of summer programming. It's very fun, it's very tiring, but we have Space Week, we have technology, nature, sports, culture, and each of these weeks we theme it out around something that we think would interest the youth. What do they want to learn about space? What do they want to learn about nature? What can we inform them? What experiments, what activities? Because oftentimes in school, sure, we learn about a certain subject, we learn about mathematics and English, but how does that affect the real world? How can we apply that? How is that going to be useful for me later on in life, right? We are able to present that to our youth in a way that is interesting, that is engaging. We present them with experiments and activities. And to tie it all together, not to brag, doctor, but we are able to take them on several field trips. We have the opportunity to take them to the Science Center, to the Natural History Museum. Multiple times out of the year, we go to the beach. Oh God, at Cabrillo Beach, we're able to hatch eggs in our hand in a tiny cup. And these are the small opportunities where youth really are able to see in person, oh, this is what I learned in class, this is how it's applied to real life. And these are the moments that really can spark that initial fire in their hearts, in their brain of, I want to do this when I grow up. I want to make this change. I don't want to see any more trash at Cabrillo Beach. I want to learn how dinosaurs came to be. I want to X or Y, right? And so for us, that investment that is being presented to us in the community of Wilmington, we are able to, if even at a small scale, ignite some sort of fire in the brains and in the hearts of our youth. We are very blessed. Again, I don't want to downplay it any little, but we are very blessed to be able to connect with 30 youth, 40 youth, 60 youth at times, and to present them with those opportunities that otherwise they wouldn't have access to. And yeah, it's small opportunities like these, small activities and programs where they are exposed to things that maybe the educational system can't provide for them. We are able to bring that to them regardless of whether they are able to pay for it or not, whether they are able to take that course in school or not. They can come to us during the summer, they can come to us during the after school program and learn a little bit more, learn something that otherwise wouldn't be available to them. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm glad we were able to do this, live and in person, because you're looking at it, visually. I was going to ask the question, I've already, answered it, going back into the connectivity of someone's success is now that we've got Dr. Leigh here, right, from the campus on the, the community farm with you individuals, you know each other now, right? And you've got, the Altasea folks here. And there's that chain, that link, that linear connection where said, yeah, I know somebody, I feel comfortable enough to ask them, right? And it's back to that point of like, you're never going to know if you don't ask. And so, I appreciate you guys hosting this today, and always appreciate the partnership with Cal State Northridge, with Altasea and Santa Monica College, and the work of the coalition, and all this stuff that we just we just love to do. It's part of our lives. So as we're wrapping up, saying thank you to everybody who's going to spend time watching this video, who've come here in person. We've met. I have to do a shout out. The coral doctor, you got to see his social media. We met somebody here in the audience she's a lawyer by trade, but she's looking at the growing of coral, regeneration, and all this other stuff. So there's some amazing people you just run into when you do this kind of stuff. So as we wrap up, I'd like to give the panelists the final word, not me. I'll say my thank you now, but starting for Dr. Leigh and going right down the line, just some parting thoughts for everybody, via camera and here in person. And to everybody, I'm signing off. Say thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I think one of the biggest things, working in education, specifically having to do with, the ocean and conservation, is just making sure that we provide as many opportunities to support and give confidence to our youth that they are able to do whatever it is that their goal is. It's not going to be the same as my goal is. It might not be the same as, anyone up here, any of you, but they have something that they want to accomplish. And if we can have a tiny, tiny role in making that a possibility, then I think we have to do everything we can to make sure that that happens. But yeah, I'll just end with that.
Yeah, I would just say that, especially for those of you that are here, that you would experience, and even on your way out, experience just walking through this farm. I think this farm in many ways is a great example of that, of the possibilities when there is a space. And here at this farm, and I'm using that as the example, you have a group of local residents, you have a group of folks from different backgrounds who they had their own expertise, and they have their own ways of doing specific things and growing plants and vegetables, and specific ways of planting trees and planting seeds from their experiences, from their education. And so they brought their science, and they brought their expertise and their architecture, and everything that you see here was built by residents in this community, and it's beautiful. And that's the power when we're able to bring resources, when there is a space that is available, where there is a respect and honor for communities to be able to have a piece of land and do something with it. There's agency, there's buy-in. And so I'm excited to be able to see the possibilities of the blue economy and the opportunities for many of our communities to be able to explore and really look at what's next for them. Thank you.
Jesus Christ, Eli. I can't follow that. I think the biggest thing is I think what Eros and what everybody has said, I think what people learn and what they see in the textbook is totally different than what they're able to experience in person, whether it be the ocean, engineering, science, whatever it is. At least if I can relate it to myself, what I learned in my textbooks is just the foundation of what you really use out there in the real world. And I think being able to be exposed to environments like the farm, for example, or the ocean for somebody that's really passionate about marine life, it makes a difference. And I think my role and a lot of other individuals' roles here is to just facilitate that path, to be able to have future generations to be exposed and dive deep into what they really want to do, and just make it easier. Let's just make it easier for them to do what they're passionate and develop something bigger for them and for their kids and their kids' kids and so forth. Because I mean, at the end of the day, we're only here for a certain amount of time. It's who's left is who's going to deal with what happens now. So
if I could just mention one thing from this, would be that anyone can make an impact regardless of a background, of age, and the younger we start presenting our youth with opportunities, the more time they have to become experts in that, to realize where they can improve, where they can help, or what they can better for tomorrow. If we are able to present our youth with opportunities to learn, they'll be able to improve upon the work that we've done. We're already standing in the shoulder of giants. We're already presenting them with opportunities that I myself didn't have. And the more we are able to provide to them, whether they be in kinder, first grade, middle school, or high school, or young adults, the better tomorrow can be. And there's a lot of opportunity in the blue economy. There's a lot of opportunity in the STEM fields. There's a lot of opportunity, but they just need to have access to them. It needs to be ready and available. And with that being said, I think that if we can all contribute in some sort of way and present them with those opportunities, tomorrow will definitely be better.